And also it's great to be doing this as part of Stephen's Festival, which he puts on so superbly every year, possibly sometimes twice a year, or more than that even. This book, which incidentally is on that table there, and there don't need to be any copies left by the end of the evening, and it is free, was put together in the course of 12 months, really. March 2020, we weren't really considering doing a book for the exhibition, which is in the library and at Pier Gallery. And then when lockdown happened and the exhibition got postponed and had a lid put on it and postponed again and what so forth, one of us, and I don't know who was foolish enough to suggest it, said, well look, why don't we do a book of poetry of the languages spoken in Hackney? And that's what this book is. And it was an enormous pleasure and an enormous pressure to do it. But to gather poems from around the world in languages spoken in a London borough that's close to my heart. In my own borough I live in is Tower Hamlets, where there's a very similar range of languages, was very moving for me. I'm going to read a few poems, not too many, all of them in English with one exception, because I found one person who will very kindly read a poem in the original language. I have looked round the audience for Latvian and Lithuanian speakers and various others and not managed to find. But if there are any, then do make yourself known. One of the things I know that matters a lot to Stephen, and it's in the structure of this festival, is giving platforms, enabling poets who are living in this country but whose language is not English, poets writing in languages from outside England, in other words, a totally anti-Brexit stance and action, to give fantastic support. I want to read two poems in particular by two poets. One is a German poet who was born in Vienna in 1915, Stella Rothenberg, and she managed to leave Vienna in the 30s. She was Jewish. She managed to leave. She lived almost the rest of the next nearly 80 years of her life in Leeds, writing extraordinary poetry but remaining pretty much unknown, certainly to British poets. And that's something that wouldn't happen now, largely because of things that people like Steve does, bringing poets together. We included two short poems of hers, and again I want to read these because they sort of say such different things. First one, Der Mensch, human beings. Human beings hate their rivals, their adversaries, their subjugators, their oppressors, their inquisitors, their jailers, but most of all, human beings, being human, hate their victims. And then a second poem, and please note the all-encompassing contrast. Bitte, please. Pray grant me the strength to want to take notice of everything in life and the wish to treat all living things gently. next poet I'm going to read is a Czech poet, Ivan Blatný, who also came to this country about the same age as Stella Rothenberg, but in 1948. And lived much of the last 30 years of his life. He died in 1991 in asylums and mental hospitals and care homes in Ipswich and Essex. For about 10 years when he was writing poetry, and he said to his doctors and nurses, "I'm a well-known Czech poet." They of course laughed at him and threw his poems in the wastepaper bin. But then luckily one of the nurses was married to a Czech guy, and she went home and said, "Have you ever heard of a poet, Ivan Blatný?" And he said yes, he was a very well-known Czech poet, as he had said. He also has this wonderful but very natural poetics and practice of writing poems in 3 or 4 languages, not translating lines. He'd write 3 lines in Czech, a line in German, 2 lines in English, a line in Czech, half a line in French. So I'm going to read from 2 fragments of his, for obvious reasons. I cannot forget feeling one morning in Alexandra Park. I was completely connected with white pigeons. They were white as snow. He, the Lord of all creatures, created the drug called art. I saw him again after years in the reading room of the East End Library, where I went every week to read The Listener, to see whether my poem sent there was published. Of course, none of the poems he sent to The Listener were ever published. His collected works, by the way, now are 1,000 pages in Czech. Anyway, sorry, I'm going on a bit, aren't I? But, you know, I just wanted to read those 2 poets in particular because of the stories they have, and because of, you know, the context of where we're here and why Steve, or partly why Steve does what he does.